the equation into MATLAB and use Christopher Sims toolkit to get the solution of the model. So first, I cast them into this form. So this is YT, this is all of your variables. This is YT minus 1, and then this is the exogenous shocks, and this is the expectational errors. And you have the gamma 0 and gamma 1. That's just a matrix full of numbers and parameters. Okay, for example, you have this system of equations, and then you define the YT as this, and then you can get the gamma 0, gamma 1, the C, the psi, the pi, the z. We macroeconomists love Greek letters, right? So you have to know this is what we call psi, this is what we call pi, then you have a far pi, you have a fancy psi, whatever. So this is my model in MATLAB. This is not pretty, but it gets me somewhere. Okay, so I have a log linearized production function. I have log linearized marginal cost. I have log linearized Phillips equations. I have log linearized Lagrange multiplier. I have the Euler equations. I have capacity utilizations. The G0 is the gamma 0 matrix, and then G1, that's the gamma 1 matrix. And then if you go down here, we actually have something like 56 equations. That includes the exogenous shocks. So you cannot solve this model using pen and paper. It is impossible to find a closed form solution. You cannot solve this analytically. You can solve this numerically. So we solve the model, and then what we write here is actually finding that with fiscal multiplier, right? You have a system of equations that describe your economy. Now, you want to shock the economy with a certain fiscal shock. Say, for example, now I have tax shocks and how that output reacts to the tax shock. This code right here, generates that fiscal multiplier. So we're not just doing government consumption multiplier, we also use in government investment multipliers. We have capital stack, labor tax, we have transfer shocks multiplier. And then what we try to find is the effect not just to output, but also consumption, investment. We have consumption of savers and non-savers, right? So, and this code, that's generate the fiscal multipliers for the economy using the dynamic present value multiplier. And then this one generates the multiplier without the discounting. So if you go back to the slides, that's the fiscal multiplier without the R in it. So what we're trying to do here is actually, hopefully it works. So we create a histogram that captures the multiplier. So what we do is we simulate the economy for 100 times. Well, actually, in our paper, we do it for like 50,000 times. So we simulate the economy for 100 times, and that way we get 100 multipliers, right, for a given fiscal instrument. Now we have the multipliers of government consumption to output. This is government consumption to consumption, government consumption to investment, and government consumption to government investment. You can see that the red bar is the multipliers created by using the dynamic the dynamic present value multiplier, and the green one is generated using the cumulative multiplier. So you can see that the one with the discounting actually shift the distributions to the right. This is just a very simple simulations of fiscal multipliers. So what the message that we're trying to say here is that, you know, whether you use 1, 2, 3, or 4, whether you use this one or that one and that one and that one, it depends on your features. For example, this is what we got so far. This is for RBC. RBC is a case without the fixed price, so you have flexible price in the economy. With the impact period of 4, you don't see differences in multipliers. Either using cumulative or dynamic present value doesn't give you much difference. Going to 20, you see that, you know, the one without discounting shift the distributions to the left. When you talk about the case with non-savers and savers, that would differ as well. When you talk about new Keynesians, that would differ as well. So we see here, you can see in the new Keynesian model with the time impact of 4, there's not much difference between R and R&D, whether you count the multiplier using discount rate or not. You know, you can see that, you know, the difference is very small. But if you go to 20, you know, you get to see some differences in this area. So it seems that, you know, the distribution shift to the right a little bit. With savers and non-savers, you know, things gotta get a little more vague, right? You know, this is, yeah, you shift the distribution a bit to the left, but how can you actually justify that the difference is big or not? So what we do here, we so now we count the difference between the cumulative multiplier versus dynamic present value multiplier by looking at the probability distributions. For example, if I run my models, if I simulate my models 100 times, and then 99 times I got multiplier greater than 0, it means that, you know, the probability of my multiplier is bigger than 0 is almost, it's close to 1, right? So here I can just looking at this graph. Okay, this is the first one. This one set the multipliers of government consumption to output with the time impact of 20. You can see that, you know, if I simulate the model for 100 times, you know, 100 times my multiplier will be bigger than 1. But if you use no discounting case, you only get 0.978. So there's the difference around like 2.2%. Means that they're not exactly the same, right? When you want to go to other type of tax multiplier, for example, if I want to go to consumption tax, what if the government raises consumption? What is the multiplier to output, for example? Or what if they say So here you get this number, which is like, it's very, well, it's not very small, it's like 11%. Yeah.
When you run the model times, what will change the model?
That's a really good question. Change in the model as features, or
If the model is set,
yeah. So we have the shocks, right? We have fiscal shocks, we have government consumption shocks, we have tax shocks. We draw a random number from the normal distributions. We feed the number into the shocks, and then the shock propagation mechanism. For example, now you have a shocks of tax, for example. It's a positive tax, means that you have a contractionary fiscal policy. What happened to output? For example, you can trace that effect through your system of equations. So you draw a different number each time that would create different number each time. So means that you run the equation 100 times, the same type of equations, but with different number from the random number generator. So you use random number generator in MATLAB. You see here, this is the random number generator. And I simulate my model 100 times. We will use like 50,000 simulation for this model. And then this model actually estimate the parameters using the Bayesian methods. So we set the priors of the parameters, for example, I don't know, the share of the non-saver, for example, the mu. You set them to 0. It means that your model doesn't have any non-savers. So every agent in the economy is Ricardian agents. Or you can actually estimate the mu from the distributions. You set the distribution to be like a beta distributions or gamma distribution or null or random distributions. We use the data. We use 12 series of data to estimate the. So we use 12 observable consumption, investment, labor, wages, nominal interest rate, inflation rate, fiscal variables. This is pretty complicated, but say for example you have a parameters in your model. You have okay. Say this log linearized model, right? I have the parameters of chi. That's the price indexations of the price rigidity, or for example, this easiest one. Okay, I have mu here. That's in the aggregate consumption. I have parameters of mu, right? As a researcher, you can set mu with whatever, but what is the mu that consistent with your data? So you take real data. Here we take US data. We take 12 variables, and then we estimate what is the parameters, what is the mu that matches the data. So it's not that, you can set mu to be whatever, or here you can set delta G to be whatever. You estimate, when I say estimate the model, means that you estimate the parameters of the parameters in the model. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, we started this project 2 months ago from being like, probably we can publish it into whatever journal, but then after we find that we can actually do a lot with this model. We can go from RBC to Nucation, we can go from non-saver to savers, we can add time to build, we can add different features, we can, go to fiscal theory of the price level version of this model. We actually survey the whole literature of fiscal policy in the macroeconomic setup. So we're trying to shoot for a higher ranked journal, but there's a lot of things still need to be done. I still need to read 90 papers. I still need to do a lot of simulations. And then mostly the simulations are being done by changing the parameters here. I'll highlight this. This is the parameters that we will play with. So, say for example, taking this off. If we estimate this parameters, means that we go from a flexible price to the fixed price level. And then if we change this parameter to 0, means I have non-savers. So what I'm doing here is creating simulations from switching on and off different type of parameters. So because this is a nested model, when we switch one parameters, it could be like a completely different model. So yeah, I don't know whether you guys can follow me, but I'm trying my best.
So the dissertation of this curve consists of many equations, right?
Yeah, it's only one system of equations, but it's a nested model.
Yeah. So it is called equation systems, and the equation system is nested. We will learn about nested model in econometry. Nested model, but we are still introduction of econometry. In the 6 or 7 class. So this was nested and not nested model. Whether it is mixed equation and equation, whether it is nested or not nested. So we will learn about that. And if we start, I explain that, or maybe you have a recently about how to estimate the parameter, the coefficient, and also constant. That's a constant. So, and if you start say that, explain about how to estimate the equations based on Bayes method. And we just learned about ordinary square.
That's the very 101 of frequencies method in statistics department. So in statistics department, we have frequencies approach and Bayesian approach. So frequencies approach and Bayesian approach. Yeah, frequencies approach, they assume the distributions. Bayesian doesn't.
But in econometrics, we learn about OLS, ordinary square, and also maximum likelihood. Is there any difference between maximum likelihood and Bayes method?
In the Bayesian methods, they have the survey of Bayesian methods. This is very nice. Not a survey, but just like a quick introduction of Bayesian estimation and DSG model. This is written by my professor at M.Ec.Dev. So before, DSG model was being estimated using maximum likelihood in GMM. But then the latest development, people tend to use Bayesian because all of the technique that has been found by the people at the statistics department allows us to actually connect the data with the parameters. So what we do is actually taking a prior, for example, I assume that mu is 0.5, and then I have the data, I have a set of data, I create a likelihood, and I use what we call the metropolis testing algorithm to update the parameters. So now, after plugging into the metropolis testing algorithm, for example, the second step, my mu is 0.6. And then you do that again, you update the parameters. So that's what they call Bayesian estimation. Yeah. So it says that the GMM rely on the same first moment information for identifications. So they rely heavily on the moments, but Bayesian doesn't. You update the distributions. You update the, for example, you set the mu to be 0.5. When you do the metropolis testing algorithm, you would end up having mu equals 0.8, for example, with a certain standard errors. So yeah, so it's very neat. You know, DSG model was being criticized by a lot of people saying that, oh, your parameters is not, I'm not saying it's wrong, but you know, it doesn't make sense. For example, you come up with a very high mu, 0.99, and you say that, okay, all the people, you know, almost all people in my economy is non-saver. There's only 1% of people in this economy think about, you know, maximizing their utility subject their constraint anyway, but that's not the case. When you take the data and then you estimate the parameters, you link your model, your structural model, into the real data. And that way you can actually say that, oh, okay, mu equals 0.6, quite makes sense, for example, or something else. So, yeah. That's, I'm still learning about Bayesian as well. I still have to take a class next semester. My dissertation is kind of my life journey. Because, you know, as a doctoral student, they ask you to learn new things every single semester. So you started from, you know, setting up your own model, and they teach you how to log linearize, and they teach you how to solve the model, and then you know, your professor asks you to go to math department to take some classes, they ask you to take dynamic programming, they tell you to go to statistics department to take Bayesian inference, and I'm going to do it next semester. So at this step, I'm still learning as well about Bayesian estimation. So yeah, it's just a quick review of what a Bayesian estimation looks like. So now, as a researcher, you can say that I'm doing Bayesian estimation. My parameters is being set consistently with the data. So I just don't say, oh, okay, I would just set this parameter to be whatever I like. Or I set this too high to match whatever moments. Because what we do here is you simulate the data, you simulate the model, you get to simulate the data, you try to match the moments of your simulated data to the real data, right? You can just set the parameters to be whatever you like. So it's so high that it doesn't make sense anymore, but your moments matches the real data. You can say, oh, my model works really well, but you know, you cheat by taking some parameters to be very high. We don't want to do that. This is why Bayesian estimation, you know, comes alive, because you want to tackle that problem in the sense that now the parameters that you get from your model, you estimate it using Bayesian estimation is consistent with whatever embedded data that you have. So yeah, I don't know whether, you know, I'm making sense this past hour, but yeah, that's what we're trying to do. So we survey the whole literature of structural model. We create a large nested data. We simulate each different features to see what kind of features of model, whether it's like flexible versus fixed price, or savers or non-savers, or I don't know, investment adjustment or no, to see what would be the difference, how different the multipliers are under different type of features of the model. This is what we call ourselves surveying the whole structural DSD model. So yeah, I don't know. It's pretty ambitious, but yeah.
Maybe simple questions from the economic student here.
Yeah.
Whether it is economic model or mathematical model.
Sorry?
The basic question from our economic class here.
Yeah.
Is it your dissertation is economic model or mathematical model?
It's they should answer? Or I should answer? They should, okay, they should.
But, yes, economic model or mathematical model? At our class there is some mathematical model and economic model. But here, what is that? Economic model or mathematical model? Equation system. Is there any error term in the distribution? Is there error term?
Is it deterministic or is it stochastic model?
Mathematical model is the deterministic model, and economic is stochastic model.
You want to phone a friend? 50-50? Well, we only two when I have two.
So economic model or mathematical model? Economic. What is the correct answer?
It's a stochastic model.
Stochastic model.
Take it, sure. Model. Sure. We love that question. We love that answer. Yes. Yeah. So this is a stochastic model. We have the shock, what we call in the we have error terms in the physical shock, and what we have here is actually trying to see the propagation mechanism of a shock to the economy. Say, how would a tax shock or how would a consumption shock affect output? Or so yeah. But here we only take the multiplier values. So we take the IRF and then we add up the response each single period. If you have k equals 4, and then you add up the response for 4 periods. You have k equals 20, you add up the the response for 20 periods. That's what. Has anyone seen impulse response function?
Not yet.
Not yet. In some serious econometrics. Okay.
But if you start, general equilibrium sometimes is mentioned that general equilibrium model is a mathematical model. But in your case, there is a dynamics.
You can as it's a structural model. You can link it to structural VAR. You have we have what we call a Bayesian FAR. So we take this simulated model and we take the FAR from the real data, and then you try to match them. So yeah.
Yeah, you know that the model you say is immunologic model. It is general equilibrium model also.
Okay.
And it is mentioned that general equilibrium model is a mathematical model.
It's a mathematical model. when we cast the linearized system into a stochastic difference equation, it's a stochastic model. So
I think the theory is in CG model, you don't have random.
yeah,
There is
we do
no
have the
random.
randomness here.
But in this model, you have random number. You generate some number, you pick randomly, and then you simulate the model. Then you have some kind of distribution. But in CG model, you don't have that. That's why it's not
So
that
CG is a
mathematical model.
mathematical model.
You have production function, you have consumption function, and you try to find the distribution. But this one, you have random.
Everything that we have here, the text everything that we have here, it has error term path. So we model the fiscal instrument as a stochastic process. So the fiscal rule follows an AR1 process. As you can see here, sorry. So what does the equation 58 says is that, you have a capital tax, and the capital tax follows an AR1 process with the auto regression coefficient, so rho k. And then you have this part, which is actually, this is a government debt to GDP ratio. So, for example, if the government raises debt now, something has to respond in the future. So they have to, tax more, or they have to cut the government consumption. So, so for this model to work, something has to respond to the debt. So you can't have a explosive debt. You can't just raise debt every single period without having some sort of compensation, as a reduction of for government consumption or raising tax. So in the sense that you fund the debt raised with something, but here you have the error term. So this is why this is a stochastic process. And we simulate the model by drawing a random number from certain distributions. Here we use normal distributions. So that's how we simulate the model. We draw a random number, we plug it into that stochastic process, and then you can see that how tau increase or decrease, and then you see how the propagation mechanism from the tax into output, for example. So, when the tax increases, you have less income, and then that affects your consumption, and the consumption affects your labor hours. If they're, if you say, for example, because you have less consumption, and then you try to raise labor hours to compensate for your disutility. Decrease your labor hours to compensate for your disutility, means you have lower output. Something like that. That's a propagation mechanism that we're trying to find here. But we're not trying to talk about propagation mechanism. What we're trying to do here is just to see what is that fiscal multiplier. What if there's a change in tax, in what's the impact in the fourth quarter in the future, or 20th quarter in the future. And we record that. But yeah, everything comes from the show. Thank you, Bhakti, for helping me.
Just general question, maybe not question, just I'm curious about your comment. One might say that the economy is not equilibrium anyway, but we use general equilibrium here. So that's actually that common question from common people. Don't get wrong because I use general equilibrium too. So I have that kind of question. So I want to know what is your comment about that? How do you encounter or defend general equilibrium? I think everybody also think that.
Okay. Personally, I don't think we will ever be in equilibrium anyway. Because people always move, everything always moves, and equilibrium is for me, don't quote me, but this is like a utopian concept. But see, what I believe about general equilibrium, what I like about general equilibrium, what I like about macro, you know, a lot of, well, my cohort, we have 19 students, 11 students passed the first year, 8 students dropped out. 11 students left, 9 is currently are doing, 9 are doing micro, 2 are doing macro. So I'm the minority there. They're like, you're stupid, like you assume that people are rational, like really? Or you assume that people are really maximizing their utility, like really? Or you assume there's only one Asian in the economy, like really? No, they always mock me for that. But I believe that, you know, if we talk about macro questions, we do have to use a macro analysis, and that's when the general equilibrium, you know, is needed. We talk about fiscal multiplier, for example. We're talking about income tax. Everyone is being taxed the same, just how much they earn, right? So the proportional tax, for example. But it's not that, you know, I pay tax whatever, you know, my willingness to pay says that it's, you know, just something that's relevant to my, you know, preference or something like that. So in the macro level, we still need macroeconomics and general equilibrium. So that's how I defend general equilibrium. When you say that, oh, you know, now you create this model, and is this realistic? I mean, nothing is realistic really. Doesn't mean that you have 200 equations means that your research is better than someone doing 50 equations. It is that something that you add that would answer your research question. For example, why do I have public capital in my production function? It is uncommon in a DSG model to have that public capital. But hey, I'm here, I'm going to talk about government investment, and that's why I need public capital in my production function. So features are not added to make it more realistic to me. Features added to answer our question. So that's why I'm saying that, you know, having 200 equation is not better than, you know, someone doing 50 equations. Yeah, that's how I define general equilibrium and macro. Yeah, we still need them. I mean, it's not realistic, but you know.
What I mean, imagine is that you have a set of equation systems, and how to estimate the parameter and constant here based on data using a Bayesian method, and you got the parameter, right? And then this is the parameter, and you always think about the steady state in your equations, because for example, auto-regression model, so the alpha or the beta must be between 1 and 0 to ensure that your model is converged in steady state, right? The basic question is that how is what if your model or your equation system is a chaotic system, so that is the solution.
You draw from you choose a certain distribution that matches your parameters. For example, you have a certain parameters in open interval, you use beta distributions, for example. So you draw the posteriors from different distributions. You only search it from a certain interval. Yeah. So if I search through like you say stationary, you say auto regressive coefficient, for example, and then you know we know that anything above 1 is non-stationary. We cannot have that. It always have to be between 0 and 1. So you restrict the distribution. So you restrict the search to be in that interval. Yeah.
But I mean, you want to get the solution.
Yeah.
The solution is your business equation actually.
Yeah.
For example, spending or capital
Yeah.
investment that should be solution for that equation system?
Yes, that is my biggest problem right now. For my second paper, I write something that doesn't have a solution. so I end up having a problem with that. When we see the Sims method,
That's what I don't know.
Yeah. And I can share my experience too.
Yep.
Here. Yeah, I did some kind of this model. So that's the result really, I mean, highly depends on the initial values, initial values. That's why it's very important to have very
yeah, because it's numerical analysis, right?
Yeah.
So you sometimes look at the different range, and it doesn't convert to, yeah. So,
I mean, in our words, at least, the parameters will be calibrated to have a good result.
yeah,
Good means that close to the reality.
Yeah.
And then you will have a good
Yeah.
model.
so the first step, because my model, the second model that I have, sorry, the second paper that I write myself is about fuel subsidy and the optimal monetary policy in net importer country. Because I've read a lot about fiscal policy, and there's a lot of fuel subsidy reform being undertaken by government around the world. And when and there's a lot of countries that experience the same problems: India, Egypt, and then we have Thailand. And then when you take the subsidy off, then you get inflation. All the things that you hear and you read in the newspaper. And then my research question was very, very simple: how monetary policy should be optimally conducted, given that now the government is phasing out that subsidy. So based on my experience reading a lot of fuel subsidy articles in newspaper, why don't I just formalize a model that would answer that question? So in that model, the model is very big now, because if you see my consumption here, I have my utility function, I have consumption, and I have labor. But my consumption now is consisted of non-oil and oil goods. So I have no other sector in this economy, and this is an open economy model, because I assume that my country is a net importer of oil. So whatever oil is used by firms and households in the country is being imported from abroad, and we take the price as given. And the government is subsidizing the fuel. So this model is huge, and we're talking about open economy. It is very, very sensitive to the choice of the parameters. So what my advisor wants me to do in 2 months is to calibrate the model. Calibrate the model means that we take some numbers from papers, for example, the alpha. Someone has conducted that type of research in Indonesia, and they come up with alpha equals 0.7. That's what I'm using. So I'm taking the parameters, the value of the parameters based on some research, not with the estimation. That's what I'm doing right now by me. Just trying to get the solution of my model, because I got the solution of my model already. So for example, I have as a central bank, you could use different type of inflation targeting, right? You have different type of inflation. You have inflation, the headline inflation. You have a core inflation. You have non-core. You have a non-core, and then you have the PPI inflation. What I'm trying to ask here, if we have a government that is phasing out a subsidy, what type of inflation targeting maximize the welfare of the agents in the economy? So that's a very simple question. So I'm trying to see different impulse responses from 20% reduction of fuel subsidy. This is with headline inflation targeting. This is with the core inflation targeting, and this is with the PPI inflation targeting. You can see that, for example, with the core inflation target or headline inflation targeting, 20% reduction of fuel subsidy would create a inflation of in the first period. The responses is actually very small. So this is the sense that I failed to match the increase that we saw here in our monthly data of inflation. So that's my second paper actually. This model is pretty big. You can see that the consumption consists of non-oil and oil goods, and the non-oil goods consists of domestically produced good and imported goods. This is an open economy model. So, and then of course that if we talk about the consumer price, consists of the domestic goods price, it consists of imported price, and it consists of the price of oil, right? So if we talk about the price index, you can find the price index would consist of price of non-oil and price of subsidized fuel, with the non-oil consists of the domestic price and import price. So my question is very simple. What is the correct inflation measure for monetary policy? But this model is pretty big. I'm using a lot of real frictions, and I have wage rigidities, and I also have so this is my household. They hold a domestic bond and they hold a foreign bond. I have wage rigidities as well, calculable pricings, and then I have firms that uses labor, capital, and oil in their production. This is pretty tiring because I've been trying to solve this model for 6 months and I still haven't got like a robust solution. So my results only, when I change the parameter into some range, it wouldn't work. So in the sense that it's not robust yet. So I'm switching from estimation to calibration, at least for now, because my professor wouldn't like me anymore if she would think that I'm lazy.
But calibration is more difficult because you rely on many reasons that been on suitable our study purpose.
I think calibration is. I'm not saying it's easier, but that's just to make sure that you have a solution. That's the first thing to do. You make sure that your model works. Your model works for a certain value with the parameters. Say for example, if I have my problem right now is, for example, I have this. Say if I have this alpha. I have alpha in this production function. It's working with 0.5. When I change it to 0.8, it would work. So it says that my model is not robust. There's something wrong with the. When I put it into MATLAB, there has to be something wrong with the coding. Probably, I have to learn a lot from biology. It's pretty stressful just to find a robust solution. Yeah, it's a model. The model is huge. It's big. Does anyone has another question? It's pretty to see from here. When you go to MATLAB, it's becoming a very stressful job. So that's just a very quick introduction of my second paper. Do I still have time, or should we? Does anyone have a question? No. I'm really sorry. Like I expected to present in front of doctoral student. I just kind of skip through everything. I should have shown you, as a, I was TAing for a core year macro last semester, so I should probably show you the homework first to understand what a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model is.
So you will also find reaction impulses as one function, but in economics. So that's the last pass.
Yeah, it is in time series econometrics.
Yeah.
It's called impulse response functions. In my prelim, we had to find the impulse response functions, paper and pen. so it was a crazy exam. Yeah, does anyone else have a question? No? Do we have more? Yeah, Prita? I haven't seen you for like, I don't know, 4 years or something? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that won't, this research won't discourage you from doing macro. I mean, when people tell you that you're crazy, you think that all people are rational, but I mean, I always say that you have different approaches for different type of question. So yeah, if you don't people discourage you from doing general equilibrium, right, Bobby? Okay, so does anyone have a question?
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. I'm a former of head of department I'm very happy. Yeah, very happy because we have a junior college. Focusing on general equilibrium, and it is for student year that AFI, Center of Economic Public Policy, is the first founder, first establisher of multiple general equilibrium, CGE model. It's mainly Indurani. First is Pangan, second is Indurani, and in the period of Angika Bimani, we are establisher or founder of general equilibrium. No university in Indonesia talking about even University of Indonesia. But now there are a lot of universities establishing general equilibrium. But so that's why I'm happy as a former head of department to have a unit.
There's a lot of movement these days. Central bank uses a lot of general equilibrium model. I know that a couple of so it's why this is important. Okay, so in the European countries now, there's a surge of concern in fiscal policy because as an EU member country, they're restricted. You can't have a deficit higher than 3%, for example. So Eric Lieber, my professor came, he talked about fiscal policy and how fiscal policy in macroeconomic model was still yet explored. So not many people has done fiscal policy in a macroeconomic PSG model setup. So not a lot of Ministry of, I don't think that anyone in the Ministry of Finance have done something like this to evaluate fiscal policy in Indonesia, like in a macro context. There's a lot of things still to be explored. For example, if we talk about fiscal limit, we talked about different type of policy, and we talked about government investment and how the delay of the investment affect the multiplier, for example. That things are very important, and I don't think a lot of government in the world has done such a rigorous analysis using this type of model. So yeah, there's a lot of area to be explored, and I'm hoping to learn this more so I can contribute something to the department, hopefully. Bapak ini ngerjain saya kayak saya kaget, tapi mungkin harusnya kayak dikasih lihat yang sederhana dulu.
Enggak apa-apa.
Bingung mungkin proyek rigiditas itu apa.
Jadi buku yang informasi ini masih belum bisa memahami itu. Kita baru berapa? Dua ya. Jadi kita bisa kuliah lagi ya. Hari Kampus ada kelas kosong nggak? Yang 3 hari kosong ya. Jam berapa?